Good morning and welcome to the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce's webinar entitled M&A in Brazil, What Lies Ahead. Thank you all for attending, and we would like to especially thank TozziniFreire for sponsoring this event. I am John Welch, Executive Director of the Brazilian American Chamber. On behalf of the Chamber, we wish you all health and happiness in this lovely autumn. M&A activity in Brazil has returned to its prior steady growth trend as the pandemic recedes, despite political turmoil. Consequently, M&A offers a myriad of opportunities across many sectors.
Thank you, John. I'm very happy to be here today. I hope everyone is healthy and safe. I can say that I've been, seeing the Brazilian market growing a lot, and it was kind of strange, I would say, last year when everything happened and everything started around March, and we were all concerned, how the activity would remain if people would really continue doing business in Brazil or everywhere and elsewhere, I would say. And strangely enough, things really continue, and we had a very busy year last year, and this year the business continued to grow.
So... Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, John, also to invite me and to be with Diogo and Francisco in this panel. It's really a pleasure to be here again. I will start, Marcela, probably agreeing with you, right? Everyone was a little bit on hold in the end of first quarter or beginning of second quarter of last year, right? And by the end of second quarter last year, I would say January, we saw a ramp up and continued growing M&A and capital markets in general activity, right? There are several factors, I believe, affect this, but what we have to be really aware of is this activity has perceived like that a part of the challenge of the country in terms of social, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of the economics, in terms of the political situation. What I believe is really the investor saw the opportunity, right, and continued to do business. If you look, last year was a record year of M&A activity in Brazil, as well as for the capital markets, right? We record around 1,100 deals announced last year. And up to this year, September, we already hit this number, right? So what we see is a growing curve in terms of announced deals, around 140, 150 deals announced per month in Brazil, across the sectors, right? Across the size of investments, right? And then Diogo probably also can make a comment about the size of the deals. But what we have seen is a good liquidity that's booming the M&A activity also. So we expect for this year a new record around 1,500 transactions to be announced. That's a new level of activity if you compare with 3 or 4 years ago, that was below 1,000, right? And with financial sponsors coming in, like private equities, venture capital, CVCs, right, and family offices. So there is a lot of activity in Brazil, and one of the drivers that we can never forget is because albeit the pandemic, right, we do have a new environment of economics, right, with interest rate so low that is bringing back the money and taken out of the financial markets to the economy, to the real economy.
Thank you, Marcela, and thank you, John, for the invitation, the opportunity to share the panel with such a distinguished group of panelists. I think that we have something here that is quite unique in terms of market. First, because we still have some areas, and if you look at infrastructure on a broader sense, right, including from power, natural gas to airports and toll roads, we do have a big market, and as compared to other big markets we have around the globe, I think we still have quite stable rules, which is the number one factor for those big international investors to pick a certain country to invest in. And secondly, we still have some of those areas, some of those segments that are still closed, that are still dominated by a single or two parties. So when you talk, for instance, like sectors like now natural gas, for instance, which has been attracting a lot of attention from investors, not only in the last 2 years, but now if you look back in the last 5 years, I'll say. I think some of the opportunities we see here, like the NTS and the TAG deal, those two gas pipelines that were sold by Petrobras, those are quite unique. You don't see this type of assets coming to market in other jurisdictions. And the fact that some of those sectors, they're still adapting or they're still setting their rules, it gives for some investors the opportunity to have very juicy returns. So, and I think that that can be applied across the board to all the segments. Of course, for some of them, will still depend on the government, on the political agenda to see those assets coming to the market. But when it comes to cross-border M&A, I would say that the infrastructure and those public auctions, I think that will be, I'll say, the top three segments that we expect to see more activity going forward, because this is something that is part of a broader agenda for the country, right? To enhance and to enhance the coverage of some of those, for instance, water and sewage, and of course it has some very important social. So I think it's one of those points where you have the social and the political agendas coming together. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the governments to push this agenda, and we expect to see this going forward, irrespective of the outcome of the presidential election next year.
No problem, Marcela. Nice to meet everyone. Good morning. Thanks to the Chamber. Thanks to Tozzini for hosting this. Look, first of all, I think in terms of activity levels, it's a surprise, I have to say. I agree on the high level of activity. What we saw is at the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about cash saving, and everyone was throwing revolvers and all about, is it a MAC? It was very, very active. We represent the largest issuers in Brazil, as you know. So there was a lot of work around that, about cash preservation. That took a month too. And then there was a little bit of quietness, okay? I would say summer of 2020 was, if I were to say, the one time that I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be, but then fall came and it just came roaring back, and in our experience hasn't stopped. It's been everything. It's been capital markets. It was, for some time, it was all equity. Then there was a time when it was debt, all the big issuers, significant, interesting deals. Brazil was at the forefront of ESG and some green deals. And I mean, and all the large, really a lot of creativity happening. At the same time, M&A, I agree with Diogo that the international let's say the new international players, the interest stopped a little bit. However, in the big, large strategic deals, they were there, you know. So I think it really depends on the right deal. I would say that what I would describe it is, people who are not already here are not necessarily, I need to go into Brazil at whatever cost and at whatever asset. I think that time is past. I do think, however, if the right asset comes, you find international interest, okay? And we just saw that in the large deals, but it takes a large amount. So work has been flowing. It's what I almost say is like very little changed. If you look at the volumes 2019, 2020, it's impressive how, and the sectors that, well, yes, tech was active, but tech was active everywhere in the world. I mean, tech just took off with the pandemic. And the sectors that have been active here, financial sector, consumer products, energy, it's a continuation of a story that started a few years ago. So I would say that is it's our experience, and we haven't seen it slow. Okay, now we all know elections tend to have impact on deal activity. We'll see, but I do agree with Diogo that there's a level of need, and with Alexandre, there's a level of need and deals that are going to continue regardless. But I would be, I mean, if the level of activity we saw this year continues in 2022, it would be a home run, you know. But we have to see. But I don't predict the future.
So in terms of next year, I do think I just see a major trend I think that some of the companies, and mostly those sectors that are more impacted by the GDP growth, like consumer and retail, I think those guys, I think they felt a hit of the necessity to grow their digital platforms harder than other sectors. And I think the need to expand the digital footprint, I think, is more pressing. So I do think also that some of those guys within the same sector, right? We've looked at the different categories that comprise those two sectors. I think there are some guys that did fairly well during the pandemics, and some others didn't. They were more impacted. And whenever we have this type of situation, I think it's a quite clear trigger for M&A transactions, where, as I mentioned, the decision between buy and build becomes more obvious. And instead of waiting and developing for yourselves your own digital platform, why not buying someone? And specifically when it comes to technology, we're not buying the business or the assets themselves. We're also buying the team, right? The expertise, the know-how, which is quite unique. It's not even in an economy like Brazil with a lot of those new businesses, new startups mushrooming throughout the country. It's not so easy to capture those good values, right? Those good talents. So I do think there are going to be a lot of activity, M&A, related to those companies, both companies that went public during the last couple of months, and they're not performing well in terms of share price, or companies that tried to go public, the window shut, and they couldn't do this, they couldn't IPO, and they will be, I think, more open for more transformational transaction like an M&A, a merger, or something like that. So I do think that the next, at least for the first 2 quarters next year, I think the activity on this specific driver, I think, is going to be high.
One of the points that we've been talking a lot in this last years has also been ESG. And I wanted to hear Paco's opinion on that. I wanted to know if he has seen more interest on this by the investors, if he has done work connected to that in terms of, just checking if a company really is in compliance with ESG principles, if the company is really, or if this is just a marketing strategy, right? Because it's been in everyone's mind recently, right? And ESG that, ESG, whatever. And I know that a lot of companies are really concerned about that and have been doing a lot of effort and measures in terms of, being fully in compliance with the principles that are ESG-like. But I know that it's not the case always. And I wanted to hear, Paco's opinion on that and how this is going to affect the Brazilian market in the next years.
Look, ESG, first of all, I'm not an ESG auditor, so I cannot tell you what people are really doing. But I can tell you that it's hot. It's very, very hot. It's hot in the whole region. It's not just Brazil, it's Latin America and the world, but Latin America has played a special role. And I would say within Latin America, Brazil has played a special role. Lots of companies, the Suzano gender bond. We did things for Voto Cimentos a while ago. I mean, really, Brazil has been it's a first mover in a lot of ESG issues. And we use our Brazilian experience in many deals outside Brazil, okay? So I think it's hot. I think it's gonna stay. I think you see it gaining a lot of momentum across Brazilian large companies. I mean, it's a market that today, it started with the really big ones and certain industries, but it's spreading. Now, how long these trends last? A year ago it was SPACs and SPAC and SPAC and SPAC and SPAC and SPAC. But I think ESG has legs. I think you see interest both on the issuer side and on the investor side. And Brazil has a lot to offer, given its natural industry sectors there are sectors that are, prone to improve on ESG, and companies have done it. I mean, again, I see Brazil as a front mover with, the way some companies, Natura's dealing with the Amazon, all people's being issuing strange things. And again, and you see it from the continent, in other countries, people asking, oh, did you guys work on X, Y, and Z? And thankfully we have on most of the innovative deals, and it's great. And they copy the Brazil example. So I do think it has a lot of legs. It has been a lot of work over the last year. We even have a group of partners at Cleary who are focusing on ESG issues. I am not one of them, so I am talking about hearsay here. But I get calls from clients. Oh, did you hear about this deal? And I mean, I have to kind of say, hey, I have to talk to my partner, and I can tell you about it. But certainly, it's one of the topics that has raised lots of questions and interest in the last year.
I have a team here that we do ESG works, right? I would say what I have seen, and just linking this to M&A, right? It is a critical issue decision today, right? Francisco is absolutely correct, and I fully agree. I have participated in projects where the E or the G, less than S, but the E as than G, were deal issues, right? And taking apart the financial points or the accounting, the tax, the labor issues that we always discuss in Brazil, right? Is because the E and the G were relevant for that company, and I have seen companies declining of deals because of that. But I would say, Francisco, we have two challenges here. The first one is I really believe Brazilian companies have to super exceed, right? And this is good. I'm telling for the good side, right? They have to super exceed because you have one angle that is, let's say, the government one and how Brazil is perceived outside, right? You have to be like that and appear like that, right? So our companies are more challenged, I would say, in questions of ESG because they are in Brazil, right? We have all the mineral resources, the water resources. So what I see is that our companies, that's why I say they have super exceed, right? And that's why our experience here in Latin America and in Brazil is very relevant globally, right? Because at the end of the day, I see that our companies have to start from below and reach above the line, right? And this is another challenge for the deal, right? And again, the E particularly and the G are huge topics and deal breakers today in deals in M&A. And today we are already valuing, right, in the deal, how much is the ESG component, right? In terms of how much I need to invest to be compliant, right? And to put this on a long term, as you said, right? It's a long leg, right? In compliance with global standards. And this is one thing that I believe it will help not only the country, but also the company, is what we are seeing in ESG is definitely some global benchmarks. This is what the whole ESG community is looking for, right? Not for local regulations, specifications, but a standardization, some benchmarks that can be global. This is going to help also, I believe, Brazil and the Brazilian companies.
He's asking us, which sectors do you believe will be most and least impacted by election next year? And as we all know, it's very hard to answer to those questions about sectors. It's always this kind of guess, right? But I'd like to hear your opinion on that, Alexandre. What do you think? I mean, which sectors do you believe more for next year?
I can start that, but as you said, I'm sure not going to be 100% sure, right, Marcela? But I can start with that. We can never forget that agribusiness reflects almost 1/3 of our GDP, right? Of course, this is a sector very influenced by government policies, right? But it's also a tombstone of the deals activity in Brazil, right? Now that we see commodities prices going up back again, so definitely agribusiness, and I would say the whole chain. That's what I believe is important. It's not only to look the field, right, or the crop, but the whole chain of agribusiness, right? It goes of companies of fertilizers, of tractors. So all the whole chain of that's going to continue to be active because that's a growing sector with activity. Another one that I'm sure is going to continue to be strongly and positively influenced, right, and not affected, is everything that's tech related, right? We saw up to September almost 35 billion reais investments in venture capital, and this most part of that is tech related, right? So and people related. So I believe this is one sector that's going to continue to be. We saw during the pandemic that Brazil can be an exporter also of technology, right? Of expertise. We do have a very good and well-regulated banking sector, right? We are working on the high standards of tech global definitions and needs. So I believe tech is going to continue one. I believe one that can be more affected definitely is how infrastructure, right, is going to be placed, right? My view, infrastructure was a sector that was always in the periphery, right? But it is essential today, or continues to be essential, right? We are just putting in the right place. But it's a sector that's very related to government. The good point is that this is definitely a source of funds for the government, right? And you know the government needs these funds, as Diogo was mentioning in the beginning.
And I want to thank you very much for being with all of us this morning. I hope we had some insights for you. I thank you very much, John, for the invitation for us to do this, and for the Brazilian American Chamber to host us.
And again, thank you all for coming, especially to our members. For those that are not members, please watch the brief video that follows, and we invite you to join the chamber. In the meantime, stay healthy and happy and in good spirits.